Have you heard the real story behind Sydnie Christmas's rise on Britain's Got Talent? It wasn't just about stepping on stage and wowing the judges with that powerful falsetto. Behind the glossy TV edit lies a tale of grit, sacrifice, and secrets producers never shared. In the weeks before the UK live shows, Sydnie wasn't flown in on a paid contestant ticket. Instead, she scraped together every penny, from birthday checks to tutoring gigs, to buy her own plane fare and hotel rooms for herself and her younger brother. Picture her poring over budget spreadsheets in Nassau cafes, determined to turn a viral audition video into a life-changing opportunity, even when the odds felt stacked against her. Her journey began long before that viral clip lit up social media. Born and raised in Nassau, Bahamas, Sydnie spent afternoons under a mango tree, headphones on, replaying opera arias and gospel hymns. Few viewers realized she'd trained for 5 years with a local vocal coach who specialized in bel canto technique. While the edit painted her as a raw pop sensation, her voice actually bears the hallmarks of classical discipline: perfect breath control, seamless vocal registers, and Italian diction drills mastered in humid rehearsal rooms. Every sustained high note you heard on TV was the product of daily scales, silent metronomes, and grueling 2-hour practice sessions that left her voice raw but poised for the spotlight. Yet even the best-laid plans can be derailed. On the morning of her judge's audition, Sydnie awoke with a scratchy throat and alarm bells ringing in her head. A cold threatened to steal her voice just hours before she needed it most. She texted her coach in a panic, "I might lose my voice today." Undeterred, Sydnie spent the interim between camera checks and wardrobe fittings steamy-eyed in her bathroom, inhaling eucalyptus vapors and sipping honey lemon tea by the quart. Between wardrobe runs, she did gentle hums and lip trills in the corridor, careful not to attract production assistants' attention. When her name finally rang out over the PA system, she stepped onto the stage not with a perfect instrument, but with a voice rescued from the brink by sheer willpower. What you didn't see on TV was the hidden twist in her audition song arrangement. Producers cut her 6-second jazz flourish, a cheeky snippet of Happy Birthday she'd woven seamlessly into her medley, as too niche for primetime pacing. In her version, that brief homage to personal roots was meant as an Easter egg tribute to her grandmother's kitchen concerts back home. When editorial staff told her it had to go, Sydnie swallowed her disappointment and accepted the decision with grace. But behind the scenes, she confided to friends that Stitch had been one of her proudest artistic touches, a small fingerprint of authenticity yanked from the final cut. Beyond covers, Sydnie harbors ambitions most viewers never glimpsed. In a cramped partition booth backstage, she sketches lyrics for original R&B and hip-hop tracks on her laptop, layering snippets of her own vocals over looped sample beats. Production staff discovered 2 polished demos, one about life on the streets of Nassau, another about confronting self-doubt, that hint at her songwriting prowess. She chose to showcase vocal chops first, knowing that a callback would open doors to record label meetings for her original material. Imagine her vision of releasing a debut EP shaped not by TV pacing, but by stories drawn from her own life. Off-camera, Sydnie's world extends into mental health advocacy. Long before the judges' table, she volunteered with Voices of Youth, a Caribbean nonprofit offering songwriting workshops for at-risk teens. She credits guiding those sessions with helping her stay centered amid the storm of live TV pressure. Late at night, when social media trolls threatened to steal her confidence, she recalled the voices of young workshop participants chanting affirmations she'd taught them. That inner chorus, less polished than Simon Cowell's remarks, gave her the courage to stand firm, to know that her worth transcends a judge's buzz. In the next section, we'll peel back even more layers of Sydnie Christmas's hidden journey, how she overcame cultural barriers, navigated producers' skeptical pitches for more backstory, and tapped into unexpected community support during her UK run. Stay tuned to discover the untold chapters of her ascent, and why her story is far more complex and inspiring than any 3-minute performance you watched on Britain's Got Talent. Landing in London for her first live show, Sydnie encountered challenges that went far beyond stage fright. Accents and slang flew at her in rapid-fire bursts. Words she'd read in scripts suddenly sounded alien in conversation. When she asked for a cuppa in the green room, the attendant handed her tea with a puzzled look. After the 10th time, she realized she needed a crash course in British idioms. Between rehearsals, she downloaded a pronunciation app, practiced phrases in front of her reflection, and peppered her UK handler with questions, turning every misstep into a mini lesson in cultural acclimation. That behind-the-scenes hustle never made the edit, but it smoothed the path from visitor to contender. Meanwhile, producers pressed hard for a more dramatic backstory. They requested extra interviews about hardships she'd never mentioned on camera, a childhood struggle, a family feud, financial strain. When she politely declined, they warned her that networks favored contestants who wore their pain like a badge. The more tears, the more votes, one assistant producer confided off camera. Sydnie paused, weighed the offer, and chose authenticity over manufactured drama. She agreed to share a simple anecdote about working 3 part-time jobs, tutoring, dog walking, and delivering groceries to afford singing lessons. That modest truth struck a chord with the audience far more than contrived sob stories ever could. On social media, a different narrative took shape. While TV clips focused on her vocals, grassroots communities in London and around the Bahamas rallied to her side. A pop-up viewing party in Brixton drew 20 local singers and musicians who'd seen her viral audition. They printed homemade signs, "Go Sydnie," and "Bahamas Proud," and packed into a tiny flat, singing along to her covers in unison. Videos of their impromptu sing-alongs spread online, creating a parallel narrative of support and solidarity that Britain's Got Talent's broadcast never captured. For Sydnie, seeing that makeshift chorus was a reminder that performance isn't just a solo act but a shared experience. During dress rehearsals, she encountered another unspoken hurdle: wardrobe limitations. The show's costume team offered a dazzling evening gown unsuitable for her vocal style. She tried it on, stood at the microphone for a test, and watched as the fabric restricted her breathing. Producers insisted on replicating a high-fashion narrative, but Sydnie knew breath support was paramount. With only hours to spare, she rummaged through her own suitcase, retrieved a simple A-line dress she'd bought in Nassau, and insisted that she wear it instead. The stylist reluctantly agreed, and that understated outfit became part of her signature look, proof that practicality often trumps polychromatic glitz. Behind closed doors, the sound engineers grappled with capturing her unique timbre. Her voice carried an unusual blend of island warmth and classical precision, but standard microphone presets on the BGT soundboard flattened her upper register. Engineers created a custom EQ profile, boosting mid-range clarity and adding subtle reverb to preserve the texture she cultivated through private vocal training. For each live performance, they dialed in that profile on the fly, ensuring her classical training married seamlessly with television acoustics. The result was a polished yet organic sound, one that exemplified the unspoken tribute to her bel canto foundation. Her family's presence in the audience remained a quiet beacon of support. The show's cameras never lingered on her younger brother Jalen, clutching a homemade Sydnie #1 poster. Yet he sat in the front row, eyes wide, whispering encouragement when judges fell silent. Between takes he slipped backstage, sharing water and words of pep. Their bond, brother as confidant, audience as sanctuary, became her emotional anchor. Producers filmed only fleeting glimpses of family hugs, opting instead for reaction shots of Simon Cowell's raised eyebrow. But for Sydnie, those private moments mattered most. Outside the theater, unexpected community support bloomed. A local choir director in Croydon organized free lessons for underprivileged youth in Sydnie's name, citing her example as motivation. London's Jamaican Bahamian Cultural Collective hosted a fundraiser at a small cafe, raising money to send instruments to schools back home. When Sydnie learned of these initiatives through late-night emails, she wept, not from fear or sadness, but from gratitude at how her journey inspired others. She recorded a thank you message for each group, expressing how their grassroots efforts fueled her own determination on stage. In press interviews, Sydnie's composure masked an undercurrent of nerves. Journalists probed about her plans for post-show success, how she'd handle sudden fame, and what genres she'd tackle next. She deflected with a trademark grin and an honest pledge: "I want to keep learning, keep sharing my culture, my stories." That promise resonated more deeply than rehearsed soundbites. Rarely shown on television, Those candid moments offered glimpses of her long-term vision to bridge Caribbean artistry with global audiences, expanding her platform beyond competition into cultural ambassadorship. As competition night arrived, Sydney stood in the wings, eyes closed, envisioning that mango tree in Nassau, where her early passion took root. She drew a deep breath not just for the note she'd sing, but for the journey she'd traveled: budget spreadsheets, accent classes, wardrobe debates, custom sound checks, and a chorus of supporters unseen by most viewers. When her name rang out, and she stepped onto the stage, she carried not only her voice, but the weight of her unbroadcasted story. And although Britain's Got Talent didn't air every struggle, every quiet rehearsal, or every volunteer choir in Croydon, that journey shaped every note she sang. The night of the semi-finals arrived, and backstage buzz crackled louder than any spotlight. Contestants in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos maneuvered through narrow corridors. But Sydney paused in a corner alcove, eyes closed, focusing on one quiet mantra: voice first, heart second. The floor manager signaled her to move, and she opened her eyes to a flurry of camera operators lining the weighted curtain. Despite her growing confidence, she felt a familiar flutter of nerves, this time magnified by the unspoken weight of all her untold struggles. When her name was called, Sydney stepped forward into a halo of luminescent stage lights. Invisible to the audience was the knot of tape on her ankle, where she'd accidentally scratched herself during a hurried costume change. She had bandaged it herself in the makeup chair between runs, reluctant to draw attention away from her performance. On camera, her posture appeared effortless, but every inhalation held echoes of hours spent in vocal rest, huddled in a quiet room to protect fragile cords battered by late-night rehearsals. She began with the same show-stopping riff that had stunned judges during auditions, a sustained soprano flourish soaring through "O mio babbino caro." What the viewers heard was crystalline purity, yet only the sound engineer knew that moments earlier he'd quietly adjusted the mic's gain to compensate for a slight dip in her lower register, an artifact of the throat cold she'd fought off. "Off-air," he whispered, "you sound even better than in rehearsal," and Sydney offered a grateful smile, her heart pounding with relief and pride. Midway through her performance, a flub nearly stole her focus. She stumbled over a lyric transition, misaligning with the orchestra's cue. Judges winced. The audience held its breath. In that half-second, a lifetime of bel canto drills flashed through her mind, arpeggios in sweaty rehearsal halls, breath control exercises by dawn's first light, and her coach's admonition to always feel the music in your diaphragm. With the graceful resilience she'd honed over years, she pivoted seamlessly back into the melody, turning potential disaster into an emotionally raw moment that left eyes glistening in the crowd. After the final chord, judges erupted in applause. Simon Cowell, usually the hardest to please, leaned forward, eyes bright, and said, "That was one of the most technically impressive performances I've ever heard on this show." Amanda Holden and Alessia Dixon sent floodlights of praise her way. But what viewers didn't see was the immediate hush that followed. Sydney pressing a fist to her chest to steady her racing heart, sweat beading at her hairline, and a fleeting tear she wiped away before cameras could capture it. In that private beat, she acknowledged both triumph and the lingering fear that she could never take any single note for granted. Backstage celebrations erupted, but Sydney's crew shepherded her into a side room for a rapid COVID-style mic swap and costume check. As she changed out of her stage dress, she allowed herself a quiet moment to text her coach back home. "We did it, but yikes, heart nearly leapt out of my chest." His reply came almost instantly: "Proud of you. Let's set up a call tomorrow to refine that transition." Even at her high point, the work continued, proof that mastery arises not from a single moment, but from relentless refinement. Meanwhile, in the green room, her fellow semi-finalists shared hugs and cheers. They toasted with mineral water, exchanging congratulations, but also sympathy over the judges' toughest questions: what's next after BGT? How to survive beyond the show? Conversations drifted toward the shadowed side of competition, the treadmill of streaming algorithms, social media polls, and the specter of viral scrutiny. No cameras captured these vulnerable exchanges, yet they underscored a shared reality. Every performer grapples with fear that applause today might dissolve tomorrow. The next morning, tabloids blasted headlines about her jaw-dropping voice. but buried in the frenzy were readers' hurried comments about her unreal stability and humanizing misstep. On Twitter, fans debated whether her semi-final performance merited a direct pass to the finals. Hashtags like #Sydnie semi-final and #BGT Golden Ballad trended. But amid the digital roar, Sydnie found solace in messages from her Bahamas mentors, a video from her vocal coach praising her pitch accuracy, and a clip from her community choir director, celebrating how her journey inspired new signups for youth music workshops. Those grassroots echoes meant more than any judge's accolade. As the finals loomed, Sydnie retreated to a small practice room, the same one where she'd banked final rehearsals before the first audition. She closed her eyes and imagined singing not for millions of television viewers, but for a single child in Nassau who dreamed of a microphone and a stage. Remembering those early days grounded her, the mango tree solos, the shaky preparations in a one-room studio, and the countless moments when giving up felt easier than pressing on. Now, with the finals mere nights away, she carried every untelevised sacrifice within her voice, a testament to the unglamorous hours that shaped her artistry. When the moment arrived to head into the final livestream, Sydnie stepped forward humming her personal key change, one she'd developed in secret during countless Afterlight studio runs. She placed one foot on a small riser, leveled her gaze at the empty center stage mic, and felt the layered support of family, friends, and community pulsing through her veins. In that quiet second before her big break, she knew that no amount of primetime airtime could fully represent her journey. Yet in every sustained note, every precise breath, and every slight curvature of her wrist, she carried the untold chapters that made her performance not just a moment of brilliance, but a story of unwavering determination. The night of the grand final crackled with an energy no rehearsal could replicate. As stagehands whisked final set pieces into place, ornate candelabras, velvet drapes and a gilded grand piano, Sydnie stood in a narrow corridor, lit by emergency exit signs. No camera crew followed her here. She drew a deep breath, recalling the private ritual that steadied her nerves, tracing a single finger along her grandmother's locket, nestled in her costume pocket. This last-minute heirloom, unseen by millions, carried the weight of every unseen struggle she'd endured. Backstage, costume racks overflowed with options ranging from sequined jumpsuits to taffeta gowns. Producers had earmarked a daring metallic ensemble for her final appearance, a look designed to mimic disco-era glam. Sydnie tried it on under glaring heat lamps, and felt her chest tighten. The rigid fabric pinched her diaphragm, threatening her breath support. Within minutes, she slipped into a custom-tailored navy wrap dress she'd packed for auditions, its stretch panels allowing full expansion of lungs and ribs. Only her stylist and a single seamstress witnessed the swap. On the technical side, the sound booth roared with activity. Engineers calibrated a new microphone capsule, chosen specifically for live orchestral dynamics. At dawn's soundcheck, they discovered unexpected feedback loops with the stadium's PA system. Engineers huddled around laptops, reassigning frequency bands and deploying noise gates to preserve her clarity without sacrificing warmth. A final test revealed her lower register now sat comfortably above the orchestra's brass section. With that fine-tuned balance secured, the audio team exhaled, confident that no broadcast glitch would betray her months of bel canto training. Sydnie's family arrived in the audience just minutes before airtime. Her younger brother Jalen slipped inside wearing a bespoke t-shirt reading "Sydnie in my heart." She caught his eye through a gap in the curtains and mouthed, "Thank you." Their mother, carrying a single pink rose, settled into the furthest row to avoid camera focus. Producers deliberately avoided panning to family during the live show, preferring reaction shots of celebrity judges. Yet behind every note she sang, Sydnie felt her family's silent applause echo in the rafters. When the lights brightened and the orchestra began the opening bars, the audience saw only her poised silhouette. The broadcast showed sweeping crane shots and dramatic slow-motion cuts. What viewers didn't see, the conductor giving Sydnie a subtle nod, the same cue they'd practiced over private video calls when she was still in Nassau. That unspoken signal reminded her that every beat and breath remained anchored in genuine musical partnership, not just televised spectacle. Midway through her aria, a medley blending Nessun Dorma with an R&B twist, judges leaned forward. Simon Cowell, his hands clasped, tried to mask a rare look of wonder. However, Cameras omitted the exhaled sigh he released out of sight when she executed a hairpin dynamic shift. Producers later spliced that untelevised moment into promo reels, but not during the live broadcast itself. For Sydney, that private sound of approval mattered more than any on-air highlight package. After her final note, thunderous applause filled the arena. Judges rose to their feet, and confetti cannons signaled the broadcast pinnacle. Sydney bowed, tears glinting under stage lights. Off camera, a stage manager handed her a water bottle wrapped in a small Caribbean flag, an emblem brought from home for good luck. She slipped it into her dressing cover and raised it to her lips as she exited the stage. That silent nod to her roots never aired, but defined her authentic victory. As judges prepared to deliver feedback, Sydney retreated to a private green room nook. Her coach's last text pinged. "No matter tonight's outcome, you've inspired a generation." She reread it on a phone locked away by producers for security. In interviews, they showed only her poised smile. Yet in that hidden moment, she let herself tremble with the realization that her journey transcended reality TV drama. Her voice had become a vehicle for every untold rehearsal, every cultural hurdle, and every tender family bond. When the judge's verdict was revealed, her name among the top finalists, her public reaction appeared spontaneous. Cameras caught her gasped hand over mouth and sparkling eyes. What they didn't capture her deep exhale of relief, the way she sank to the floor once off stage, and her whispered prayer of gratitude that the unspoken chapters of her journey had fueled her final performance. Later news editors truncated her backstage interviews to 30-second soundbites. They focused on her plans for post-show singles, overlooking revelations about her songwriting demos and mental health advocacy. Yet within industry circles, insiders circulated full transcripts, showing how she pledged to donate part of her winnings to Caribbean youth music programs. That pledge, hidden from primetime viewers, affirmed that Sydney's story was never just about talent, but about purpose uncut by TV constraints. In the days following the grand finale, Sydney's world shifted from adrenaline-fueled broadcasts to a quieter but no less intense rush of opportunity and behind-the-scenes maneuvering. Television crews packed up, the stage lights dimmed, and judges' verdicts, so decisive on air, became one small part of a much larger story. While viewers saw her triumphant bows and confetti showers, what they didn't see was the flurry of private meetings with talent managers, lawyers and branding consultants, convened in London hotel lounges. Her phone rang constantly, recording studios proposing fast-track albums, sponsorship teams pitching cosmetic lines, and philanthropic organizations seeking her endorsement. Amid the whirlwind, she stayed grounded by screen-sharing daily reflections with her vocal coach in Nassau, ensuring that every business decision preserved her artistic integrity. Within a week, she signed a bespoke recording agreement with an indie label that valued creative control above all else. Major labels had courted her with six-figure advances, but Sydney insisted on co-production credits, approval of final mixes, and the right to release original material on her own schedule. The media never aired her reluctance to sacrifice artistic agency for immediate payoff, preferring a simpler signed-by-Universal headline. Instead, she chose a partnership, whose fine print guaranteed that at least 20% of album proceeds would fund Caribbean music scholarships, a clause she personally negotiated during a late-night video call with the label's founder. Simultaneously, she quietly delivered on a promise made to her community choir in Croydon. Without fanfare, she organized a benefit concert at a small Camden church, inviting local gospel groups, steel drum bands, and Bahamian drummers she'd met at pop-up viewing parties. She covered venue fees out of pocket and reserved front-row seats for foster care residents. No cameras rolled, no TV crews filmed, yet the event raised thousands for Voices of Youth, her mental health charity back home. Footage of the evening circulated on social media only after attendees uploaded phone videos, capturing Sydney kneeling to embrace a teenage musician she'd mentored, an unedited moment of gratitude and solidarity. Back in Nassau, her family juggled pride and practicalities. Her mother, once too humble to claim spotlight, found herself fielding calls from local radio stations and tourism boards keen to associate with their daughter's success. Her younger brother Jalen reverted to his behind-the-scenes role, helping draft press releases and moderating her Instagram comments for trolls. Even her coach's studio transformed into a community hub where aspiring singers booked lessons for weeks in advance. None of this made the BGT highlight reel, yet these grassroots ripples embodied the very impact Sydnie had dreamed of when she began practicing scales under that mango tree. As her debut single entered production, Sydnie penned lyrics in a dedicated writer's room set up in a Kensington townhouse. Producers and ghostwriters sat around a teak table strewn with notebooks, coffee cups, and reference tracks. She steered every session, demanding authenticity rather than formulaic R&B tropes. She insisted on weaving in Bahamian patois and island-flavored percussion loops, even when some collaborators argued for a more generic pop sound. That insistence, omitted from television recaps, signaled her refusal to conform to international star stereotypes. For her, global appeal and cultural specificity were not mutually exclusive but complementary. Meanwhile, her mental health advocacy deepened. She accepted an invitation to speak at a London summit on youth well-being, sharing her own experiences of burnout, self-doubt, and the pressure of public scrutiny. The televised clips cut away before she revealed how ongoing therapy and community support spared her from a breakdown, not the soundbite fodder producers wanted, but the raw truth that resonated with listeners more than any polished performance. Organizers later reported a surge in workshop signups, crediting her candid testimony as the catalyst. Commercially, she negotiated endorsements that aligned with her values: an eco-friendly headphone line, a cruelty-free skincare brand, and a vitamin company whose profits fund mental health research. She turned down lucrative deals that conflicted with her principles: fast fashion sponsors or sugary drink companies, decisions she articulated in boardrooms but never under the spotlights of press junkets. While tabloids speculated about her strange refusals, insiders knew she was laying groundwork for a sustainable, purpose-driven career far beyond a single season on reality TV. Simultaneously, she launched secret pop-up performances in London parks and Nassau town squares, inviting fans to join unannounced concerts via cryptic social media clues. These guerrilla gigs bypassed ticket fees, allowed her to test original songs before small audiences, and kept her rooted in the spontaneous joy of live connection. Those unbroadcasted evenings reminded her that performance isn't only about stadium lights but about shared vulnerabilities under open skies, a principle she vowed never to forget as her profile rose. In private conversations with her siblings and close friends, she sketched a 10-year plan, building a multi-city touring ensemble blending classical and contemporary elements, founding a songwriting collective for Caribbean artists, and eventually launching a music school in Nassau. These dreams, too expansive for a 3-minute TV segment, were nonetheless central to her vision. They underscored her refusal to settle for fleeting fame, aiming instead for a legacy as expansive and enduring as the music she loved. Her BGT journey, distilled into audition clips and final performances, was only the overture to a career she intended to compose in movements of growth, advocacy, and cultural celebration. The show may not have told viewers about the boardroom negotiations, the guerrilla concerts, or the late-night tears of gratitude and exhaustion. Yet each of those untold chapters shaped Sydnie Christmas's path from contestant to cultural ambassador. As she approaches the release of her first EP, the final section will explore how she remains anchored in authenticity, balancing commercial success with community care, and why her greatest performance may lie ahead far beyond the glare of any talent competition. As the release of her debut EP dawns on streaming platforms worldwide, Sydnie Christmas stands at the threshold of a new chapter, one defined not by competition buzz, but by the substance of her own artistry and values. The 5-track collection titled Roots and Resonance blends island rhythms with classical flourishes, showcasing her original songwriting and bel canto-inflected phrasing. Early previews sent fan forums into a frenzy. The opening track, Homecoming Waltz, features a string quartet she recorded in Maastricht, while the closing ballad, Mango Tree Memories, layers R&B grooves atop steel pan samples. These creative choices, so integral to her identity, would have been unthinkable under a major label's tight formula. Yet here they form the EP's unifying thread, a musical handshake between her Bahamian upbringing and global ambitions. Commercially, Roots and Resonance defies easy categorization, debuting simultaneously on classical, adult contemporary, and digital R&B charts. It may not claim the top spot on every list, but its steady climb reflects the organic support she fostered, grassroots audiences who saw her embrace small venue performances, mental health advocates who heard her candid podcast interviews, and Caribbean diaspora communities whose pride in her success powered word of mouth. Critics praised the EP's authenticity. One review lauds how her voice bridges centuries of musical tradition without losing a single grain of personal story, while another highlights the delicate balance of ambition and humility that resonates on every track. Amid these accolades, Sydnie remains anchored in community care. A portion of EP proceeds is permanently earmarked for the Voices of Youth mental health workshops she once led, ensuring that studio success directly benefits at-risk teens in Nassau and beyond. She personally reviews grant applications, corresponding with young songwriters about funding needs, mentorship pairings, and local performance opportunities. When her manager suggested outsourcing those duties to a foundation administrator, she refused, arguing that direct engagement honors the relationships that sustained her through every audition and setback. Those handwritten emails, unseen by daylight television, represent another measure of her integrity, investments of time as valuable as any promotional tour. Her grassroots philosophy extends to touring plans. Instead of booking exclusively large arenas, she outlines a dual-tiered tour model: headline concerts in major cities and intimate story sessions in community centers, libraries, and school auditoriums. These acoustic performances feature stripped-down arrangements and kunda segments, allowing audiences to probe her creative process, ask about her songwriting demos, or participate in impromptu vocal warm-ups. In Miami, she'll host a Healing Through Harmony workshop for refugee youth. In Berlin, a masterclass on blending classical technique with modern production. In Tokyo, a panel discussion on cross-cultural collaboration. These under-the-radar events, promoted through local NGOs and social media groups, won't generate primetime headlines, but will cement her legacy as an artist who privileges meaningful connection over mass spectacle. Meanwhile, her high-profile endorsements proceed with the same thoughtful vetting that defined her BGT recording deal. She partners with a sustainable fashion label to launch a co-designed performance capsule, ensuring that her stage outfits meet eco-friendly standards and respect garment workers' rights. A headphone company arranges a limited edition Sydnie Signature series, whose packaging includes educational materials on breathing exercises and vocal health. Each launch doubles as a fundraiser for music therapy programs in hospitals, a nod to her belief that song can heal wounds both emotional and physical. These collaborations might have been distilled down to simple commercials on television, but in depth they weave together artistry, advocacy, and industry innovation. Her personal growth continues behind the scenes. Weekly drive time calls with her Bahamas-based coach alternate between technical vocal exercises and reflections on leadership, how to mentor new artists, manage burnout, and maintain authenticity when headlines venerate fame over substance. She journals every day, tracking vocal range shifts, mental health checkpoints, and creative sparks, the scribbled beginnings of a potential second EP or even a memoir. Each entry serves as a compass, keeping her oriented toward intention rather than inertia. When industry peers invite her to exclusive parties or awards galas, she politely attends but rarely lingers, preferring a quiet corner where she can listen to emerging talent or review community feedback. In tandem, she explores a documentary project chronicling her unconventional rise. Tentatively titled Beyond 3 Minutes, the film will mix BGT audition footage with unseen rehearsal room clips, interviews with her family in Nassau, conversations with workshop participants, and scenes from her pop-up concerts. Co-produced with a grassroots media collective, the documentary pledges to reveal the full texture of her journey, from mango tree auditions to courtroom-style contract negotiations, illuminating the backstory that reality TV compresses into highlight reels. This long-form narrative promises to inspire aspiring artists who lack prestigious training or big-money backers, showing them that authenticity and persistence can carve new pathways in a crowded landscape. Her ultimate ambition remains rooted in education. Plans for a music school in Nassau have solidified into a nonprofit initiative, supported by a board of community leaders, educators, and former BGT contestants she's mentored. The curriculum will integrate vocal technique, songwriting workshops, mental health awareness, and even contract literacy, equipping young artists with both creative and practical tools for navigating the industry. Seed funding comes from EP proceeds and philanthropic grants she personally solicited, while her siblings contribute logistical support from London. When the inaugural class convenes, she intends to teach the first session herself, ensuring that the school's ethos mirrors her own commitment, art grounded in empathy, excellence shaped by perseverance. As Roots and Resonance continues its global trajectory, Sydnie Christmas proves that the truest measure of success lies not in trophy cases or chart positions, but in the lives uplifted by her music, the systems reshaped by her advocacy, and the generations empowered by her example. Her greatest performance may yet lie ahead, in classrooms humming with newfound confidence, in mental health halls resonating with song, and in the stories of teens who see in her journey the possibility of rewriting their own. In that unfolding narrative, the untelevised sacrifices, the off-camera kindnesses, and the private rituals will echo far longer than any television clip, testament to a legacy that transcends the spotlight and thrives in the collective heartbeat of shared humanity.